Right, hello again. Welcome to the third and final video in our VFX tutorials. Today we're going to be looking at rotoscoping. Okay, and if you don't know what rotoscoping is, it looks a little something like this. Or it could look something like this. Okay, so it's very simple. It's literally the equivalent of if you've used Photoshop before. We're drawing around a subject and we're putting an effect on them, and hopefully while they move we're going to track them a little bit. Okay, like with the other video I did, just a little disclaimer, especially in the context of when you're filming. If you are looking to rotoscope something, someone, something, do take into consideration the more sporadic movements that you've got. Sorry for hitting the microphone. It's going to be harder to rotoscope because there's going to be motion blur. There's not going to be a solid object for it to kind of track to and draw an outline of. So like my example, for example, which is quite simple. I'm not, stressing the camera out by blurring too much, by moving too sporadically. Okay, so do bear that in mind. All right. So let's get into it. Okay, so if this is the first After Effects video you've watched, welcome. This is After Effects. This is how we do our VFX. Now, as I said in the last video, if you have used Premiere Pro before, which I assume you would have, try and treat it somewhat similar, how the shortcuts work, how the interface kind of works. Things are just in a slightly different place, but assume the same because they're all from the same Adobe family. Okay, so what we've got is our After Effects window. First and foremost, we want to go to Composition and New Composition. Okay, I'm just going to check my recording is still on, which is good. Excuse me. And of course, we're going to want to call this rotoscoping, like so. All right. And we want the preset to be 25 frames, 1080p HD, of course. And it can be up to 30 seconds. Okay, I'm just going to leave it on 30 seconds for today, nothing to stress about. Okay, and then we can just hit OK. And what you'll find is our timeline at the bottom has appeared. We've got our preview window, and on the right hand side, we've got our effects, info, properties, anything we might want to manipulate, all there on the right hand side. Okay, right, so let's import our footage. So I'm just going to use some example footage of myself. So I'm going to go to my file explorer on the bottom. I'm going to go down to the media and film server. I'm going to go to student resources. I'm going to go to tutorials. I'm going to go to editing exercises and rotoscoping, and you'll find rotoscoping stock footage. Okay, I'm going to click and drag that into my project window, which is this top left. Okay, and what this basically does will house any music, any footage, any solids or shapes or text will all sit in there, so I can access it if I so desire. Okay, now what we want to do is we want to drag that into our timeline like so, to click and drag down to the bottom. All right, and what we want to do now is we want to click and drag the end of each clip of the part I want to rotoscope, of course. So what I'll do is I'll hit play. Let's just watch it through for a second. Okay, like so. Does a clap, look left and right, and I clap again. Okay, and that's the clip. Obviously I want to rotoscope myself clapping, turning myself into a cartoon in this instance, for the duration of the two claps. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag along. As soon as the hands come together about there, I'm just going to grab this end, and you'll notice the two arrows on the cursor. Click and drag to about here, like so. And if I drag down to this side to the end of the clap, when that comes together to kind of cancel it, I can click and drag, and that one goes there, like so. As you see, the image itself will disappear. Okay, and that's basically the area of the footage that we want. So getting to the Roto Brush tool. So what we want to do is we want to double click on the clip, and that will take us to like the clip's properties, so to speak. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to click on our Roto Brush tool, which is this one up here. Okay, and we're going to move our pin to the first frame that we want to work with, which is this one here. Okay, and what we want to do is we just want to click and drag in amongst our inside outline of our subject. Okay, so we don't want to be too close to the edge, because with it being Adobe software, it's got lovely bits of kit inside it which will allow it to detect the outside. If I now let go, what it will do is it will scan the rest of it. Okay, okay, this is a great learning opportunity. So what we've done is we put in a 25 frames composition, but our footage is 24 frames, or to be incredibly specific, 23.976. Very, very easy fix. We're just going to pop back to our composition, or we can go back to project. we're going to right click, composition settings, and just ensure that it's the same frame rate as our footage. No problem at all there, and we can just hit OK, navigate back to our rotoscoping, and we can continue where we left off. Okay, the only other thing that it might trigger you with is if you go to view and resolution, just make sure it's on full. It should be, but that might be the only other thing to trip you up. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to draw around the inside of my frame. Okay, do be quite relaxed with it. It doesn't have to be too intense because I've got quite harsh edges on my jeans from the background, and obviously my arms and my shirt. It's quite a defined color difference, so I can then just do that and let go. Okay, and straight away, fantastic stuff. I can use Alt and the scroll wheel to zoom in, and I can just check and hold space to grab the hand and drag around. That is pretty good. Yeah, it's done very, very well. Okay, very, very easy to do, and that is done our first frame. Okay, hypothetically speaking, if it looked like this, for example, and it's detected a bit too much, very simple. You can see that my cursor is currently green. If I hold Alt, it goes red, and I can deselect stuff like so. Okay, and I can pop that back how I needed it to go, and just make sure that that is nice and aligned. Okay. Very straightforward. The software does like to learn with you. That's why it was getting a bit upset with me, because I pretty much told it to undo what it had already done perfectly. It was just an example. It will start to try and detect the edges as and when. Okay, so that's how we use the brush. Just click and drag to do selection, hold Alt to deselect, and just make sure we're on that first frame as well. Okay, let's move on. So there's a couple of different overlays you can use to check, and they are just down here. Okay, so we've got our standard purple outline. We can click this red box here, and we kind of get like we get in the selector mask on Photoshop, we get the red outline as well. And we also have our alpha. It took me a while to figure that out until I read it. And that will tell us the exact outline and how it looks. Excuse me, which looks phenomenal. Okay, so we're really, really happy with that. Okay, so do feel free to check through them just to ensure that your rotoscoping brush is spot on as well. Let's just go back to the red for now, and let's continue from there. Okay, now what we want it to do is we want it to scrub the timeline. Okay, so basically these two lines here, so we've got one going left and one going right, it's only analyzing a few frames, and I kind of want to just drag that all the way to the end because it's not a very long clip. And it's going to analyze the full frame for me rather than me going through and checking it. Okay, it basically, this is the window in which it's going to automatically detect the outline as it moves. Okay, because it's got a pretty impressive AI, but if it moves too much, you might have to scrub through and check it. Okay, so now what we'll need to do is we'll just need to kind of scrub through, and it's just checking it for us. We can just let go there, just have a look at how it looks. Let's just let it load. It might take a second depending on how fast your computer is, which is fine. But yeah, then we can drag through a little more like so. Okay, and it's just roto brushing it all. Perfect. I can, I believe, actually hit play and it will do it for me as we go through. There we are, and you can see it's analyzing each frame as we go through. And doing a very, very good job of it as well. Okay, so it's already tracking my shoulder. It knows that shape is what I want, and it's going to move through pretty well. Okay, if for whatever reason a big bubble comes out, or it thinks that's what you wanted, you just hit pause in that frame and you just correct it. Okay, so we're just going to be going through and checking each frame is correctly rotoscoped. In this instance, the red overlay is ideal because if any bits go white, I know it's incorrect, but in this instance it's looking pretty spot on, which is fantastic. Okay, simple as that really. That's the Roto Brush in its selection phase. We should move on to adding some effects now. And just to show, this is whilst it's all rendered, and we can see that that looks absolutely phenomenal. Okay, we might actually have one minor problem. We have a slight issue on my shirt. There we go, look at that. Right, so let's grab our purple so we can see that. Look, this is what we've got here. Good little example. It's just detected that, which we don't want. Oh, my apologies, Control Z. We want to just extend that bit there. There we go, and we've got our shirt back, which is great. So there we go, it's a perfect example of it just missing a little bit, but we've just fixed that up, like so. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so once you're happy that the outline is accurate throughout the selected clip, simply click back on your composition tab, and we're going to scrub back to the beginning, like so. Okay, and we can navigate to our effects tab, which is up here. Now, obviously, there's a variety of them you can go through. I'm using cartoon, but have a little play. I'm not sure where that actually is. Might be in stylized. Yeah, so there's loads in stylized that you can pick. I'm just going to grab cartoon. I could have searched for it, but I thought I might as well find it. So what we can do is we can then drag the cartoon effect onto our clip like so. And we've got our effect controls. So if we were on the project window, we wanted to get to that effect to influence its settings and see what we can do with it. So it's got quite a nice outline. Looks very Borderlands, if you guys know of that series and franchise. We can go on effect controls, but say for example I wanted just to make it just the outline, I can just go to edges, it'll make it white. That's what the effect I'm going for personally, but you can play with all these values exactly the same as Premiere Pro. If the little if they're blue and you have the finger with the arrow pointing left and right, I can then play with some of the settings and see what some of them do. Okay, so I can drag that up, a bit more detail in the lines, but it's a much of a muchness. Okay. Right, now, the final touch we want to do, of course, is it's obviously got a black background, okay? We're going to just want to put the original one back. Now, we could have done this at the start. You can do it at the start or the beginning, okay? Obviously, all these settings are down here. If I want to influence them as well on After Effects, it's just down to preference. But I'm just going to click this little arrow here just to close that little effects of that specific clip. And all I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to drag the clip and put it below it, okay? Like all of our Adobe software, it uses a layer system, and whatever layers on the top will sit above it. And as you can see, obviously this top clip is our Roto Brush and Rotoscoping, and obviously it's that selected area. If I go back to the beginning, and now hit play, obviously we've got our clip below it, and if I then clap, obviously it needs to render through, as we all know. It's got a lot of work to do because it's quite an interesting effect. So for the render bar, as I said in the 3D camera tracker, but I'll just repeat myself now, it's slightly different to Premiere Pro. You actually have to hit space and it will render as it plays. So the first playthrough is actually going to be quite clunky and not very nice, but you can see, because this is quite an advanced effect for the software to render through, it's going to take longer than the camera tracker, okay? So just hit space, sit back, relax, and let that render through, and then you can watch it back in real time. Okay, so I'll see you when it's rendered. Right, I'll be honest, with this being one of the slower computers in the department, because it's in Studio 3 for the radio stuff, it actually took about 5 to 7 minutes to render that short 4 to 5 second stuff, because it had to do each and every frame. Okay, so do be prepared if you're on a slow machine to have a bit of patience with it. Okay, but that's, lesson learned. Okay, if you've got a slower PC, it may take a little longer to render. Okay. But that is the simplicity of the Roto Brush, okay? One thing I did forget to mention alongside the moving quite sporadically is make sure that your background and your subject are quite contrasting colours to give your Roto Brush as much opportunity to detect the lines as possible. I'm just going to pop in an example now of an old clip we filmed. It wasn't in relation to the Roto Brush, of Will opening a light bag for a different video, but because he's got the dark brown hair on the darker background, the Roto Brush really struggled. Now if I show you the cartoon effect over it, you'll notice that it starts to kind of spit and then kind of spread out as it gets quite confused of where those defining lines are. Now if you do end up doing that, I mean, look at the mosaic example next to it and it actually looks really successful, okay? And that's used the exact same technique, just a different effect. So it really depends on how contrasting your subject is from its background to really get that effect, okay? A lot of things to consider with prepping this type of effect, but with a lot of time and patience, you should be able to make it look really, really good. So that is everything from the rotoscoping tutorial. Any questions, do feel free to drop us an email at technet@farnborough.ac.uk, and that's everything. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.